Hello, and welcome to the Channel of Stories. Dear listeners, before we start the story, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like and share in the comments where you are from. Thank you. Here we go.
I never meant to work in politics. I was 23, still half-dazed from college life, clinging to the last traces of campus certainty. My degree was fresh, the ink on it barely dry. Political science, ironically. I didn't even believe in politics then, not really. I believed in good people, hard work, and paying my rent. I took the job answering phones in Senator Langston's office because it sounded impressive to my parents, and because I didn't want to move back home and explain what a gap year meant. David Langston. The name echoed through the marble halls long before I ever saw his face. He was a known figure, twice divorced, sharply dressed, always surrounded by staffers with phones glued to their ears. A voice that thundered through the Senate floor, yet he was somehow always whispering in the corners of power. Control clung to him like cologne. You didn't walk past David Langston without knowing it. The first time we met, I was carrying too many folders, trying to impress a chief of staff who didn't even remember my name. My heel caught on the edge of the carpet and, just like that, I was down. Papers flew like startled birds, schedules, memos, committee briefings scattering everywhere. And then he knelt beside me. His suit was dark gray, his tie loosened just enough to seem human. He picked up a page and handed it to me, his fingers brushing mine. "People forget how human this place used to be," he said quietly, almost like he wasn't talking to me but remembering someone else. I didn't know what to say. So I smiled. Not a flirty smile, just one of those nervous, polite things you do when someone older and important notices you. I tucked my hair behind my ear and tried to look like I hadn't just humiliated myself. I didn't know then that this small moment, so brief it barely registered at the time, would become the thread that unraveled everything. Later that day, I couldn't stop replaying the interaction. The softness in his voice. The way he'd said used to be. As if something had been lost in these halls that no one else noticed. I told myself I was just intrigued intellectually. I mean, who wouldn't be curious about a man who'd been in the Senate for over a decade, who could both charm a room and cut someone down with a single sentence? I never thought he'd notice me again. But he did. At first, it was just my name. Spoken in passing, almost casually. "Can MIA handle this?" The way he said it, like I was already part of the fabric of the place, like I belonged. I'd hear it in team meetings I had no business attending, or from the assistant chief of staff when she handed me a folder with my name scribbled on a post-it in his handwriting. He remembered my name. Then came the small requests. "MIA, could you drop this off for me? MIA, come sit in on this call, it's boring, but you'll learn." It felt like mentorship. Like one of those rare golden bridges that form between a seasoned professional and a hungry young intern. I thought maybe he saw something in me, intelligence, potential, ambition. I wanted to believe that. But slowly, the mentorship lines began to blur. He'd linger after meetings. Wait until everyone had left the room before he'd ask how my weekend had been, or if I was settling into the city okay. Once, he brought me coffee, exactly how I liked it, iced. 2 sugars, splash of oat milk. I hadn't told anyone how I liked my coffee. I asked how he knew. He just smiled. I pay attention. There was a moment, one slow afternoon when the office was humming low with post-lunch drowsiness, that I caught him watching me. Not in a creepy way. Just watching. Like he was studying something he couldn't quite figure out. I should have looked away. But I didn't. I held his gaze, heart thumping somewhere near my throat. He blinked first. That night, I walked home feeling like the world had tilted slightly. Nothing had happened. Not yet. But everything felt different. The air seemed charged. I started staying later at work, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I told myself I was ambitious. I told myself I was proving my worth. But part of me, maybe the part one didn't want to admit existed, was hoping he'd be there. Waiting in his office with the lamp turned low, tie loosened, jacket off. Always in control. Except when he was around me. One day, he passed me in the hallway and murmured, "You're wasted behind that desk, MIA." Then he kept walking, like he hadn't just reached into my chest and rearranged my ribs. That was the first time I knew it wasn't just professional. And I didn't know if I was thrilled or terrified. There was a rhythm to the office after hours, a kind of hush that settled like dust on the furniture. Phones stopped ringing. Staffers filtered out in waves. Lights dimmed one by one, leaving only the quiet hum of monitors and the glow from the windows facing the Capitol. That's when things between us began to shift in ways I couldn't ignore. It was a Wednesday. Late September. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, and I was still there, half because the printer had jammed again, half because I couldn't bring myself to leave just yet. I was in the copy room, muttering curses under my breath, when he appeared in the doorway. "You're still here?" His voice was low, almost amused. I turned, startled. Printer jammed. Again. He walked in, loosened his tie the way he always did when he was settling in for a long night. This place eats machines alive. We used to have someone on staff just for the printers. I laughed softly, unsure if it was safe to relax. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me with that unreadable expression that always made me feel both seen and exposed. Then he said, "This office used to feel like home." I don't know what made me respond the way I did. Maybe the loneliness in his voice. Maybe the fact that no one else had seen this side of him, the quiet version, not crafted for TV or debate stages. I asked, "And now?" He paused. Looked straight at me. "Now it only does when you're in it." My breath caught. The silence between us stretched so long I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Something passed between us, unspoken but undeniable. And then he crossed the room in 2 strides and kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't impulsive. It was intentional, like we had both been waiting for permission we finally decided not to need. His hand rested on my waist. Mine found his shoulder. And in that moment, every rule, every fear, every caution we'd rehearsed in our heads fell away. When we finally pulled apart, he whispered, "You don't owe me anything. But I haven't felt like a man in years, until you." I couldn't speak. I didn't trust myself to. So I just let it happen. Let him hold me. Let the night wrap around us like a secret we were too scared to name. In his office. After 7 p.m. No one saw. No one could. And yet I knew nothing would ever be the same. Once that line was crossed, there was no UN crossing it. The next morning, nothing had changed on the surface. We sat in separate rooms. Took separate calls. I handed him his briefing packet like always, fingers brushing just briefly. No one noticed. Or at least, no one said anything. But underneath it all, everything had shifted. Every shared glance held something unspoken. Every MIA, "Can I see you for a moment?" sent my pulse racing. The privacy of his office became a haven, a place where the walls were thick and the lights soft, where he could drop the act and I could breathe in his presence like oxygen. He would close the door softly behind me, his jacket draped over the back of a chair, shirt sleeves rolled up just enough to make me forget how to think. We'd sit across from each other under the warm yellow desk lamp, reviewing documents we both knew didn't matter, the space between us crackling. Sometimes he'd touch my hand, just barely. Sometimes we didn't touch at all. But even then, his eyes would say everything. "I see you," they seemed to whisper. "I need you." He was always so composed in public, razor-sharp on camera, disarming in interviews. But with me, he unraveled, quietly. One night, he stood by the window, watching the lights of the Capitol flicker like fireflies and said, "Do you know how exhausting it is to never be allowed to feel?" I didn't answer. Just walked over and rested my head against his back. He covered my hand with his and held it there for a long time. We became something electric. Something terrifying. And though we never said the word out loud, we both knew, it was love. Wild, impossible, utterly real love. He started calling me at odd hours. Just to hear my voice. Sending me quotes from books he thought I'd like. Once, he left a small note card in my coat pocket. It said, "You make me forget I'm supposed to be careful." I knew the risks. I knew what we were doing wasn't sustainable. But when he looked at me like I was the only true thing in his world of performance and power, I forgot to care. Love shouldn't have to hide. But we did. Every kiss stolen behind a closed door. Every whispered joke in a hallway. Every excuse to linger just a few seconds too long. We were fire trapped in glass. And the cracks were starting to show. We told ourselves we were being careful. That no one suspected. But the truth was, the walls in that building were too thin. People knew. Or at least, they knew something. They didn't need confirmation, they just needed a few well-placed whispers and one too many coincidences. The first rumor came as a question. "Hey MIA, who's the guy bringing you coffee at 8 a.m? I laughed it off. Shrugged. Said something about a kind colleague. But my stomach twisted. Because I knew. And I knew they knew. And I knew it was only a matter of time before things unraveled. Then came the reporters. Not full-on scandal seekers yet, but curious. Sharp-eyed. "Who's the girl with the letters?" one of them asked during a press event, eyes flicking toward me, standing silently by the entrance. Then HR called me in. It wasn't accusatory. Not exactly. But it was clear. "We're asking that you take a step back from direct work with Senator Langston for optics." That word. Optics. As if my existence was inconvenient. A PR smudge. He didn't fight it. He said it was temporary. Said it was for the campaign. Said it was for safety, mine and his. "We have to be smart," he told me. "This won't work if it's under a spotlight." I understood. Or I tried to. But that understanding came at a cost. The phone calls slowed. The stolen moments became rare. I was moved to another part of the office, fewer excuses to see him. Fewer accidental meetings. The hallway became colder. His door was always shut. I'd sit at my new desk, staring at the blinking cursor on a grant proposal draft, trying not to cry. Trying not to wonder if I was being erased. If I had only ever been a temporary reprieve from his real life. He still found me sometimes. Late at night. He'd send a message. "Need to see you." And I'd go. Of course I would. We'd sit in silence. His hand in mine. Both of us pretending it wasn't falling apart. Once, he said, "You're the only thing that makes me feel like I have a soul left." I should have left then. I should have known love wasn't supposed to come second to optics. But I stayed. Because when he looked at me, I didn't feel like just an intern. I felt necessary. Vital. But even electricity fades when it's denied a current. And the cracks were becoming impossible to ignore. The day it happened, I was already on edge. I'd heard whispers about a controversial education bill. Rumors that the senator would vote in favor, despite his earlier promises. It didn't make sense. He had always been passionate about education. About access. About women's futures. About mine. I asked him about it. Just once. Carefully. I framed it as a question about policy, as if I didn't already know the answer. He didn't look up from his desk. "It's complicated," he said. "Isn't it always?" I replied, trying to sound light. But he didn't smile. The vote came on a Thursday. I took a long lunch and sat in the gallery, tucked between lobbyists and bored tourists. Watching him. Watching them all. It was surreal, like watching actors recite lines they'd rehearsed for weeks, all pretending their choices weren't affecting real lives. He stood. Voted yes. Just like that. The room didn't react. No gasps. No cries of betrayal. Just polite silence and the shuffle of paper. I stared at him. I think I was waiting for him to look up. To glance toward the gallery. To show some flicker of guilt or doubt or recognition. But he didn't. He just took his seat. Calm. Composed. Controlled. It felt like a slap I hadn't seen coming. I left the building without speaking to anyone. Walked straight home in a daze, my heels clicking against the concrete like they belonged to someone else. That night, I wrote the note. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, the same one I'd used to cram for finals just a year ago, and poured every ounce of grief and clarity onto the page. "I never wanted your power," I wrote. "I wanted your truth." The next morning, I slipped it under his office door before the building filled with people. I didn't wait to see if he read it. I didn't want to know if he'd respond. I handed in my resignation, cleared my desk, left my badge, and I walked away from the marble halls and whispered promises, from the man who could move nations but couldn't choose me. I walked away from the person I had become with him, and into the uncertainty of who I might be without. Grief doesn't come all at once. It seeps in slowly, like rainwater through a ceiling crack. Some days, it's just a drop you barely notice. Other days, the whole roof caves in. I moved 3 states away to a town where no one knew my name. Rented a small, 1-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of lavender and dust. I started teaching 7th grade civics, of all things. Teaching kids about government, about the people who shaped history. Sometimes, when I wrote his name on the board as part of a lesson, Langston, Senator David, I felt like I was tracing a scar. The students didn't know who he was. Just another name in a textbook. That helped. Their questions were innocent, unburdened by context. I could answer them with the neutrality of someone who hadn't once kissed him under the soft glow of a Capitol Hill desk lamp. But at night, when the classrooms emptied and the papers were graded, I'd sit by the window and replay it all. I wondered if he ever thought of me. If he missed the way I made him laugh when no one else dared. If he still remembered the taste of my coffee order or the feel of my hand resting just over his pulse. Mostly, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. If I'd been a detour in his life, while he remained the highway in mine. I didn't date. I didn't go out. I threw myself into work. Started volunteering at the community center. Read too much. Slept too little. I became something quieter than I'd ever been, like I was afraid that if I got too loud, the past would hear me. But healing has a sneaky way of arriving. Not with trumpets or closure, but in tiny mercies. A student who stayed after class to thank me for believing in her. A coworker who brought me soup when I had the flu. The way the wind moved through the trees when I walked home, like it was trying to sing me something I had forgotten. I started to feel steady. Not healed, exactly, but grounded. The ache remained, dull and constant, but I learned how to live beside it. Still, there were moments like when I'd turn the corner and smell his cologne on a stranger, or catch a glimpse of him on TV before I could change the channel when the year collapsed, and it felt like it had only been a week. I never expected to see him again. And I certainly never expected him to show up like that. It was a Tuesday. Late October. The air outside was crisp, and the leaves had turned every shade of red and gold. I'd just finished a lesson on checks and balances, ironic, in hindsight, and was helping a student with her homework when I looked up and saw him. At the back of my classroom. Leaning against the doorframe. No suit. No tie. No staffers hovering near. Just him. David. For a moment, I thought I was imagining him. A ghost conjured by exhaustion and too much coffee. But then the student noticed him too and whispered, "Miss Thomas, someone's here." I blinked. Nodded. "Go ahead and finish the worksheet, Lily." He didn't move as the students filed out, chatting and laughing, backpacks swinging. He waited until the last one had disappeared down the hallway before stepping fully into the room. His eyes swept over the posters, the desks, the bookshelf in the corner. I watched him take it all in, looking not like a senator, but like a man displaced in time. "You cut your hair," he said finally. "And you look tired," I replied. He smiled, soft and cautious. "I am." I crossed my arms, unsure what to do with the storm inside me. "What are you doing here?" He walked to one of the student desks and sat down, folding his hands like a penitent. "They offered me Secretary of State." I nodded slowly. "Congratulations." I said no. That stopped me. "Why?" He looked up at me, and for the first time in over a year, I saw him as I remembered. Not the senator. Not the strategist. Just the man. "Because I realized," he said, "that I spent my whole career pretending to serve the people while pushing away the only person who made me feel human." I didn't respond. Couldn't. My heart was loud in my chest. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. Held it up like an offering. My letter. The one I'd left on his desk. Creased, worn, the edges soft from too much folding. He placed it gently on my desk. "I read this more times than I want to admit," he said. "I kept it in my coat every day. And not because I hoped you'd forgive me. I just needed to remember that someone once saw me. The real me." I walked to the window, needing space, air, anything to stop the shaking in my hands. I didn't trust this. I didn't trust him. He stood slowly, careful not to close the distance too quickly. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "Not even forgiveness. I just need to know, is there still a place in your world for a man who's trying to learn how to be honest?" The silence stretched between us, full of broken trust, buried hope, and something else, something still alive, still quietly burning. I turned to face him. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I felt like maybe I was home. The letter lay between us, fragile and familiar. He had kept it all this time. The paper was worn, almost translucent at the folds, and I could still make out the words I had scribbled in midnight heartbreak. "I never wanted your power. I wanted your truth." I remembered writing it like I remember pain, a sharp flash, followed by numbness. I hadn't expected him to read it. Not really. I just needed to say it. To reclaim something of myself before I disappeared in the shadows of his ambition. Now, it felt like holding a time capsule. A relic of who I'd been and who we had once been together. "I read this when I lost a vote," he said softly. "When I almost signed a trade deal I didn't believe in. When I stood on debate stages and forgot who I was. Your words anchored me. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to ask why he never wrote back. Why he let me go. Why he was here now, when everything had already fallen apart. Instead, I asked, why now?" He stepped closer, the space between us narrowing but still charged with uncertainty. "Because the truth you asked for. I wasn't ready to give it then. I didn't know how. I was scared." He took a breath, looking down at the letter again. "I spent a year asking myself if I could live with the choices I made. And the answer was yes, until I imagined never seeing you again. That's when I knew I couldn't." I shook my head slowly. "You broke something in me, David. You made me believe I mattered, then chose power over me. You kissed me and then voted against everything I believed in." "I know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "And I've regretted it every day since." He reached into his coat again and pulled out a second piece of paper. A letter. This one was his. "I wrote you back," he said. "About 100 times. But I was too proud. Too ashamed. I didn't know if I deserved to ask for your forgiveness. Maybe I still don't. But I need you to read it." I unfolded the page with trembling hands. It wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs. Honest. Raw. It talked about fear and failure. About missing me in the smallest moments. About how the capital felt hollow without me. How every decision since had been haunted by my voice. When I looked up, his eyes were glassy. "I'm not here to reclaim the past," he said. "I'm here to ask if maybe there's still time to write something new." I didn't answer right away. But I didn't walk away either. And that, I think, was the beginning. Again. We didn't rush. How could we? Too much had happened. Too much had been lost. But something had also survived, something quieter than passion, more patient than longing. We started with small things. Texts. Phone calls. A coffee one Saturday morning that turned into a walk by the lake, where he confessed he still remembered the way I hated whipped cream but loved cinnamon on everything. He remembered. Every small, ridiculous, tender detail. It wasn't like before. There were no closed doors. No hiding. No need to watch our reflections in polished hallways and wonder who might see. He met me in the daylight now, hands open, intentions clear. He apologized again. Not with grand speeches, but in consistent, quiet actions. He listened more than he spoke. He showed up early to help set up for a parent-teacher night at the school. Sat beside me at a fundraiser without flinching at the folding chairs or fluorescent lights. When a student was struggling, he donated books anonymously. I knew it was him. He never said. We built a new rhythm. Not electric and dangerous this time, steady and true. One evening, months later, we were sitting in my living room after a community potluck. My students had swarmed him with questions, laughing at how tall he was, asking if he'd ever met Beyoncé. He answered every question with sincerity and warmth. Now, in the quiet, he handed me a frame. Inside was a photo of us. Just the two of us at that fundraiser, laughing over something no one else had heard, heads tilted together, unaware of the camera. "I want this on your desk," he said. I stared at it, overwhelmed. He took my hand. "I've had all the power in the world. The titles. The podiums. But it meant nothing without someone who saw me. Who kept me real." Tears welled up. I looked at him, not the senator, but the man. The one who had come back. Who had chosen me. "I don't need perfect," I whispered. "Just honest." He nodded. "Always." And so, he stayed. Not as a politician. Not as a symbol. But as the man who had once lost me. And found his way back, not because I needed him to. But because he needed to be real. And now, he is. Mine.